everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're in. My name's Heather Payton, and I'll be one of the presenters today. Today, we're going to be talking about dev test environments with Chef. This is part of our continuous delivery series, which kicked off with a session on test-driven development with Workstation. If you didn't catch that, John did a great demo. Followed by a secrets management joint presentation with a keyless that Trevor was part of, if you missed that. And then today is the third event in the series. We're going to be talking about dev test environments. So as I mentioned before, we've got Trevor Hess here, who is one of our Chef product managers. And then we have John Tonello, who is one of our technical product marketing managers. And again, I'm Heather Payton. I'm part of the product marketing team here at Chef. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right into things today. We're going to start with a perspective of kind of what are some of the current trends and challenges we see in the dev test area. Then we'll jump into Chef's approach to building and delivering dev test environments. And then we'll follow on with actually an overview of the product features that we're putting together as part of DevTest. And John's got a cool, slick demo to show also as part of that. So just jumping right into current trends and challenges. So, building dev test environments, the need to build dev test environments has been around pretty much since, we've been building software. And it's surprising how challenging building dev test environments continues to be for many organizations. And really, over the past year, we've really seen an escalation in the need for dev test environments, really being driven from now there's more digital initiatives than ever going on within organizations, and POCs are at high demand before business decides what they're going to fund. They typically want a working POC, which of course requires a new dev test environment. Agile DevOps CD pipelines. Teams are more distributed, doing more branch development, doing more project, more automated pipelines, doing more hourly, daily merges. The need for dev test environments just escalates with all that. Fit for purpose test environments with robust configurations. Again, this ties a lot to Agile, smaller releases more frequently. People don't need a full pre-prod stage environment. They just want to be able to kind of run the test bed that's impacting the piece of code they're merging. And then cloud-based test environments is really, this is being driven by, in the last year with COVID, more and more people are working remotely. So how do you get secure dev test environments to all your QA and developers working remotely? Cloud is a solution there, but cloud can be expensive. Cloud can be complicated when you're dealing with, highly mission critical, dev test environments that you're trying to supply to your dev and QA teams. So when we look at testing essentials, this is from the World Quality Report, been around forever, probably like the de facto standard survey in the testing world. When you look at the kind of the key things people value in testing, having people with the right skills, better communications, collaborations across the life cycle, pulling out the areas I'm going to focus on here are where Chef helps shift test left. That's obviously tying to Agile, where you're doing more testing as part of CI dev processes. And to do all that, you need test environments on demand to be able to fill all of that. So we see pretty much the priorities. It's really interesting when you look at the World Quality Report. It's definitely a bit of a slow moving train. Where you look at almost these same factors every year with a couple percent increases. And we'll talk about reasons why we feel that's true in a minute. Again, when you look at test environment trends, there have actually been some significant jumps in test environment trends. But the one that I actually thought was really interesting was the timely availability of right test environments. So companies are getting better at provisioning test environments on demand, but they're still struggling to provide those test environments that really replicate what's running in production. So why is testing hard, testing slow, and testing expensive, right? And, why not just YOLO it? You only live once. This is a lot of work to build these test environments. I don't know if we'll ever get there. So when you look at testing, what you're really trying to do when you build dev test environments is put together, all of the pieces across all of the teams, across all of the applications, across all of the infrastructure needed to kind of replicate the environment that app's going to run in a dev test environment. And let's face it, this is just not easy, right? There's a lot of different pieces that have to put together across a lot of different teams. So it is hard. And, app changes aren't the only things that can disrupt business. On top of app changes, you have all these security policies, you have all these new configurations of infrastructure coming into your system. You have changes introduced by the database team with schema changes and all those other fun things that happen within your organization that have to be synced across dev test, pre-prod, and prod to be able to deliver those right test environments to those dev test and QA teams. So what we do know, though, is testing challenges signal bigger business challenges. If you look at Accelerate, one of the key publications in the DevOps space with Nicole Forsgren, Jez Humble, and Gene Kim, they talk about this a lot of, there's a high correlation between deployment pain and key outcomes. And a lot of this is caused by developers not having full visibility into where their code's going to be landing and what type of environment that code's going to be running in. So the closer you can bring those environments of, building prod-like environments, giving them to your dev test teams, the more successful your deployments will be. And even though building dev test environments and testing is hard, expensive, and challenging, production failures are really, really expensive and not good. So there's definitely a need to kind of continue these efforts. So as we move in now to the Chef, Chef really believes at the heart of Chef, the way to overcome the challenges is through collaboration through code, which enables all these different teams and all of these different groups to put all of these different pieces together using a common language and approach. And that's really when we look at what application delivery is, we call this application definition, is really defining what is everything that application needs, what are all of the different pieces that application is using in a prod environment, and defining that in a way that is shareable, testable, trusted, and actionable, independent of underlying infrastructure, right? We all know runbooks are great, a PDF document, but that takes a lot of work then to go through that PDF document. I think some customers' runbooks, I've seen them up to like 240 pages. And that's kind of what we talk about here. When we build those dev test environments, every time you have to go out and create a new environment and go through that runbook, right? That's a lot of time and effort. We see many clients using manual runbooks taking up to 2 months to build their dev test environments. Using a codified approach, yeah, the time investment up front to build those codified artifacts is the same, but then once the codified artifacts are built, they can be deployed as part of CI/CD. They're easier to maintain, and they're true to, it doesn't matter who sets up that runbook, right? Like when you manually click through a PDF, there's manual errors, there's inconsistencies that happen. Once an artifact is codified, it deploys and is done the same way all the time. So you don't have those production cliffs where all of a sudden you're ready to release to production and you have a failure in pre-prod and you're not really sure why. So there's all the benefits of using codified artifacts. Another great report is the Accelerate State of DevOps 2021, the DOOR report. As most of you probably know in the space, it's now owned by Google. they've released this year's report. And I kind of highlighted a few things that were new introductions in addition to the standard metrics they use around elite performers. One, good documentation matters. And, taking a codified approach helps you, document as you go, right? Like machine readable scripts that are also easy to read by humans provide an ad hoc form of documentation that makes it easier for teams to maintain, aligning their docs to their automation scripts kind of in one shot. Technical DevOps capabilities. Elite performers are 3.7 times more likely to leverage continuous testing. The more you can test, the better quality software you have, the less production failures, kind of common sense. 5.8 times more likely to leverage continuous integration. The more merges you do, the more automation you do, the more successful. And 2 times more likely to use trunk-based development. Again, kind of showing that trend towards agile development. And then the other area that was really interesting in the report was the high performance excel at implementing security practices. And this is really one area that Chef is super excited. We definitely feel we are one of the leaders, if not the leader, in merging infrastructure as code with a policy as code approach. So into a single agent, single run, eliminating drift between those dev test environments and production. And we're also seeing clients like Edgenuity recognize this as a key benefit of Chef's approach to dev test environments, talking about now it's really been a game changer that their dev teams are working in dev environments that have the corporate policies and all of the setup that's running in prod, so that when they start to push, they don't all of a sudden get, releases kicked back by security because it didn't meet a certain policy. So by being able to sync those, it's really been a game changer for Edgenuity. So with that, now we've kind of talked about some of the trends and challenges. I'm turning things over to Trevor, who's going to talk about Chef's approach to dev test environments.
Thanks, Heather. So as Heather said, we've got all these different tools we're trying to bring them together in this policy as code world, where we can combine all of our different capabilities in infrastructure management, application delivery, and compliance automation to make it so that you can ensure that your dev test and production systems are all following consistent policy. So if we double click a little bit into there and see how some of this comes together, what do each of these areas cover for us? So in infrastructure management, that's where we're handling our configuration management, our infrastructure as code, and the overall drift management, ensuring that the configuration of our systems in both dev test and production are consistent. We look at compliance and remediation. We're really looking at the security and compliance posture of our estate. We can take that content that we provide from CIS and other content providers and really ensure that our systems are adhering to the policies that we espouse to in our security and compliance teams. We can drive that further by adding in automated remediation. So taking that same set of content materials that we're providing to ensure that your systems are compliant, and adding an enforcement capability if they come out of compliance, and then having a reporting capability on top of that so that you can really understand what the state of your fleet is at any given time, again, whether that's in dev, test, or production. And then finally, most importantly on any of our infrastructure are the applications that sit on top of it and serve our customer bases. So in the world of application delivery, that's where we do things like runbook automation, application packaging, and our release and orchestration life cycles. If we take that and we look at how that comes together in a world of policy as code, once you have all of those different elements defined as code, it's all a common language that teams can collaborate and work together on, so that it's easier for teams to pass information back and forth and ensure that the policy that you're defining as an organization flows through and across teams to make sure that things are working smoothly together in the way that you expect them to. That helps it make it easier for teams to scale because folks can understand different areas more easily because, again, you're speaking that common language. Again, that helps us then pull as we're bringing all of these different changes and policies expressed through code into our dev, test, staging, production environments, all through our CI/CD lifecycle. We're pulling all of these things left. We're actually able to test and validate our policy much earlier in the process and make sure that it is safe, secure, and going to work for our customers. And by monitoring the output of all of that information and all this stuff that we've defined as code and run on our systems, we can then see how things are working, where things are compliant, where things are in policy or out of policy, and work on eliminating those little windows of risk that come through when the systems do drift out of the way that we expect them to be. And we've seen this work at several of our customers, one of whom is Early Warning. Early Warning used our application delivery and compliance capabilities as code to integrate through their CI/CD pipelines and scale it across their estate. This was a company that was running into challenges where developers were trying to work on new applications, new content, new material for their customers, but it was taking them 4 to 8 weeks to actually build out systems for them to do development work against. By moving all of these things into policy as code expressed systems, they're able to reduce that deployment time for those new systems from 4 to 8 weeks to a single hour, which meant they were able to rapidly increase their ability to develop, push out, and run through changes and feature requests across their platform. And it massively reduced the number of requirements that folks needed from 50 to 6, which is a massive, massive change. That 4 to 8 week period, there was so many different steps that needed to be achieved before a single system could be provisioned. And each one of those needed to be done manually through a separate request. So things like setting up a source repo, building out a plan for what it is we're going to do to build out the system, actually requesting that system, requesting the IP address that that system needed, putting together the deployment plan for that system. Once that system was deployed, how do we get access to that system? And then finally, can we have permission to actually put the code we want to run on that system? All of these steps can be expressed as code. All these steps can be expressed as policy and run through pipelines, which can greatly reduce the amount of effort and time that is needed to actually ship these systems out to teams. There's so many different pieces and tools that we have across our world today. There's so many different ways and tools and policies that you can follow to bring things across from your development environment out to production. If you can reduce those tools and consolidate how you express them into a single common set of policies, it becomes much easier to kind of build out these prefabricated components that you can use to develop and manage your environments, whether that's a dev system, a production system, or a staging QA system. So in our land here, that looks like an application repo and a build plan that runs through the Bamboo pipeline. We then use infra to build and manage and configure the application that's going to be deployed. The cookbook actually deploys and sets up the kitchen tests and everything so that they can validate that the cookbook is operating the way that they want to. That all gets rolled up into a policy file. And then finally, that all can be bundled together into a server request that can be automated and run through so that it becomes much faster and easier to get these systems in the state that we expect them, in coordination with the policy we expect them to follow. And with that, that's enough of me babbling on about stories. John, you want to show us something real?
Sure, thanks. Let me seize control here. I have a million different things. Bear with me just one second. My computer always wants to zoom out on everything. Not sure if you can see that. Am I sharing?
Not yet. Yep. There you go, John. Now we see you. Now you just have to start your share. There you go.
Like that. Okay, sorry about that. It's always a little bit different. So from a solution standpoint, we talk about taking policy and turning it into code. What does that? What do those policies look like? And this is something that I always like to say begins offline, right? You're discussing what are all those things that we need to have in these environments that are meet our requirements and make them exactly like we want them to be. And this is just a small list of items. I actually took this from a CIS level 1 profile, which is actually over 200 things. It's just a sort of a baseline. But whatever those things that you want, and they can be services that are running, ports that are open, users that exist or don't exist, USB mounting is enabled or disabled, whatever those things happen to be. And then you're turning that into code. And in this case, we take a look at just a little snippet of a chef recipe that's determining a few things and creating a user, setting that user as a super user, and a couple other things. But you would compile a bunch of these chef resources to essentially mitigate and manage those things on the target device. You're turning the policies themselves into something that chef can understand. And you notice that this code is human readable. It's not far from what the actual original document happened to be.
Hey, John, I just want to interrupt you. I think you're sharing the wrong slide. We're seeing the kind of presenter view with the slide and the next slide instead of the full screen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, just hard for people.
That's all right.
I'm picturing you in your office with 42 screens around you right now. So
Yeah, how's that?
yes, there you go. Perfect.
Good Lord. So as I was talking about the CIS profile, and there are over 500 of these now available that you can actually use and automate. And this is just one, and I'll show this live in the Automate dashboard. But these are controls. Then these are the things that are measuring against the device or devices, your lab, and returning active results on your compliance. So I apologize, this is a bit of an eye chart, but there in this small view, you see several controls. The first one is disabling USB storage, and it's doing some checks to make sure storage isn't able to be mounted. And the other one, disabling auto mount. It should not be running. It should not be enabled in this particular system. Things like that. So as you add those up, you get into environments that you can do quite a bit. Let me just make sure. Part of the process, in setting up a test environment and working with any kind of chef code, regardless of the destination, is doing tests locally before deploying this stuff. And Test Kitchen, which is built into Chef Workstation, and the tooling enables you to not only test with Docker containers that are sort of souped up Docker containers that behave a little more like VMs. You can use remote resources like AWS and Azure and other, you can use Vagrant. And this driver-driven approach and means that you can set the kind of systems that you want, point to the cookbooks and profiles that you want to test, run them, and you can deploy and test these things without any local resources. So particularly nowadays when we're all working remotely and you don't necessarily have an on-prem resource to do some initial testing of your code, this makes it really easy to do. So in the Automate dashboard, then you can share and collaborate. So as you're pushing your content up, you've all agreed on what the policies are, you've created your code, your recipes, your profiles to confirm your logic and everything that's in place. You upload those things to your infra server and they're visible in Automate. So people on your team can quickly look in and see, what are the configurations that we have? Does the cookbook and recipes that we're currently using, does it have this latest factor that we want? And normally when you're working on Chef code, you're using some kind of Git repo, something like that for collaboration, but it means that you can share, people have visibility, people can do pull requests and make changes and things like that, but there's no automatic changes. Someone's not just changing something on a whim and having it become part of your environment without you knowing about it or without actively doing something. So let me, I'm going to switch my screen again, share desktop here. I'm just going to bump up the font of this. Okay.
We're seeing your Teams window right now.
Yeah, I'm just going to. Okay. So this view, can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Right now I'm in the Chef Automate dashboard. I'm looking at the compliance tab, and under profiles you can see there's 501 different profiles, and I just bring these up as an example of some of the kinds of controls that you might want to do. If I look at Ubuntu, there's a whole bunch here, there's server. In each one of these controls, on that earlier slide that I had just an example of one of these controls that can be applied. And I can see, each one of these things. And the solution would be a cookbook that matches this compliance profile that actually makes these things happen. So within your test environment, again, you're going from your policy that you've written in a spreadsheet somewhere that you collaborated on. You've created these profiles with the various controls to confirm and audit your environment, the cookbooks and recipes that actually implement those configurations and everything that you want. And you're good to go. One of the things I did in here, so I actually have that that CIS level 1 profile, and I have a machine. It's just a simple Ubuntu 20 machine, and I haven't done anything to it. Doesn't have anything specific installed. But one of the nice things about this, and I run this so you can see the hundreds of pieces of output. It will confirm one way or another the settings, regardless of if you have 5 controls and resources applied to a node or hundreds of things applied. It's setting that environment exactly the way you want it, and it's keeping that environment exactly that way, the way you want it, until you want to actively change it. And then you make a single change to one cookbook recipe, you make one change to a profile and push it out, everything will be as you want it. Now this node, it's impressive that just this raw node actually successfully passed 94 of the of the controls. I think there's 202, something like that. 87 failed, 22 were skipped. And that's largely due to things that sort of have to be manually done in this case. But just in that short time as I was talking, you can see all this information is pulled out of the node. It's showing and confirming what my environment looks like. And it's going to keep, in this case, if I had a cookbook, I would remediate these things or waive the things I didn't want to particularly, that I didn't care about. But as you're designing that test environment, you can be very specific. You can keep it locked in. You can apply the same cookbooks to from your production nodes to DevTest nodes, and be confident that they have the same versions of packages, they have the same users, they have the same keys that you're sharing, secrets. All those things can be deployed very quickly and easily. I'm going to share once again, or I'm going to try to.
Here, I got you.
You see that? Good. So as I was saying, just to sort of summarize some of that, you can modify a single cookbook and apply it to all your test environment nodes at once. Particularly if you're working remotely, you can share that code so people can have, if you're setting up different systems, they can apply it and they can feel confident that they have the latest and greatest. Same thing with the inspect profiles to audit the compliance. And here the compliance is you're making sure your environment is exactly the way you want it to be, so that you're not creating things in an environment that when you push to prod or go elsewhere is suddenly going to fail. So that compliance in this case is you having a rock solid environment. Change the code in one place. If you're doing source control, you're managing that. Everybody on your team can share it. Modifications can be pushed out, shared to a lot of different folks. And one of the important things too is, if you have a brand new node, someone's new to the team, they need a test environment to use. It's not a case of taking days to set that up. It's a case of moments of applying your cookbook and your profiles and your chef code to that node, and it will be in the state that you want. It'll be ready for that person to go in a very short time, just minutes in most cases. And of course, you can apply these same approaches to your application to delivery, which we're not going to get into in a lot of detail here. But the same way, if you're sharing code, you're setting parameters, you're defining what you want and the outcomes to match, and you're defining those things and you're seeing the results that you want, so that you have stable, confident environments. With that, I think, am I handing it back to you, Heather? Or?
Trevor.
It's back to me.
Trevor, sorry.
Oh, all good. So we're just going to do a little summarizing here. Let's talk first a little about a couple other customers we've got who've been really successful in these patterns of using policy as code approach for their QA environments. One of our largest customers is Panera Bread. They're currently managing 12,000 machines with infra, about 58,000 of which are running also Habitat applications. And they're averaging about 28,000 builds per month. They've been able to greatly improve their quality and frequency of their application deployments. And they're allowing and enabling their development teams to directly manage those deployments from pre-prod, and eliminating the needs for their DevOps teams to have to work nights and weekends, by enabling those teams to quickly spin up these environments and understand the state of how all of this is coming through against their policy. Another great example is the IRL lab at Walmart. They've been working on some computer vision tools, and they've been enabling their velocity to improve by pulling through these applications with Habitat and application delivery, and really ensuring that their environments are being built the way that they expect them to be built, pulling in all the dependencies and handling all the configuration and customization that's needed for these complex AI-driven tools that they're running. So if we look at our portfolio today, we got everything bundled largely into our enterprise automation stack, which contains our app delivery capabilities, our infrastructure management capabilities, and our compliance capabilities. We've also got a couple workload aligned offerings like Chef Desktop that allows you to focus specifically on managing desktop systems. And all that sits over top of our open source projects in Chef Infra, Chef Habitat, and Chef Inspect. And it's Chef Inspect that lets you have these engines that allow you to manage your policy as code so that you can ensure the state of your systems across their rollout. So if we look at those benefits in summary, one of the three big benefits you're getting by following these patterns here, you're getting consistent environments that are following the best of test-driven development patterns and really enabling you to follow a good pattern for continuous delivery. So making sure that you've got those environments that are codified with easy to use artifacts that people can share, test, trust, and take action upon without having to worry about your infrastructure tied underneath. Being able to follow those best of breed test-driven development practices to make sure that you're shifting all of those concerns to as far left as possible to make sure that you've got environments that are tested, safe, and secure from pre-production all the way out to production, whether that's dev, QA, staging, anywhere in between, that you're following the policies defined by your organization and ensuring that your applications and infrastructure are as well tested and safe as they can be. And then enabling that continuous delivery is so key to make sure that you're delivering that value at velocity to your customers so that they are getting everything that you can ship to them as quickly as possible, continuing to drive your businesses and your organizations forward. And with that, thank you all so much for listening. If you have any questions, please go ahead and submit them in the QA tool, and we'll take a few minutes to answer any that come in. Heather, John, did you have any other parting words you wanted to send out there?
No, but I do see a few questions out there that we can take a look at if you guys are ready. So one question on the portfolio slide, didn't see Chef DK. Is that still a product?
Chef DK was turned into Chef Workstation about 3 years ago. So Chef DK is in spirit is still around, but we call it Chef Workstation now. And if you're not using Chef Workstation today, you should download it and give it a whirl.
Yeah, and it all the compliance stuff that I showed and we talk about is really, it's only available with Workstation. And one of the nice things too is it's backwards compatible. So if you're using other versions of multiple versions of Chef Infra, you can use Workstation with all of them, but it's much more robust than it used to be when it was Chef DK. And of course, everything in it's been modernized. And it's free.
Cool. Okay, the next question. If I'm new to Chef, where would I get started with trying to implement this? This seems like a lot of different pieces.
I actually just put out a blog post, which is a Chef Infra 101, which goes through a lot of the steps of just getting started from scratch. You can get that at chef.io/blog. There are also the docs.chef.io and learn.chef.io, which are longer form, deeper dives into the various components. But if you're looking for a place to start, try that blog post that I recently updated, and it takes you through everything from installing and setting up a Chef Infra server with Automate to setting up your workstation, writing your first sample code, writing your first sample profiles, bootstrapping nodes, and testing that.
Awesome. Okay, looking through this, another question. How easy is this to integrate with Jenkins? not sure, Trevor or John.
I'll let Trevor talk to that.
I mean, if you can call a command line tool with Jenkins, you can do anything you need to do in the Chef environment in Jenkins. I've seen many customers over the years with massive and successful Jenkins integrations, but really any modern CI tool you can integrate with.
In fact, we had a speaker at ChefConf that showed a GitLab integration, and that integration is pretty straightforward. You know, you're creating a simple YAML file that you can drop into a cookbook folder. It'll kick off your workflows, things like that.
Very good. I see one more question. If you have a question, feel free to go ahead and type them in. So how do Habitat and Infra work together?
We actually just did a Twitch stream about this the other day. So if you want to check that out, there's a little bit deeper dive there. But the long and the short of it is you can use Infra to deploy your Habitat applications. So any application you've built for Habitat, you can deploy through Infra and manage the supervisor or the configuration or the packages deployed on that system very easily.
Right. Well, with that, I don't see any more questions. So I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up. John, Trevor, I don't know if you had any closing words.
Just thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yes, definitely. Feel free to contact any of us with any additional questions. Check out any of the events we mentioned throughout the session. And with that, Raise, I guess you can go ahead and close things down.
Thanks, Heather. Thank you, John. Thank you, Trevor. That was a really informative session. I hope all of you really find a lot of information out there in today's webinar. So if you like what you saw, we would encourage you to share this with your teammates and professional network. The on-demand version should be available soon, mostly next week. So we will share it with you over email once it's available. And you should be able to access it using the same audience link that you're using now. So with that, thank you again and have a great day. Bye, everyone.